Hi, hello, how are you? I'm Chris from Unfun Stuff, and today we're going to be looking at why your deck building sucks. It's a tale as old as time. Boy picks up game, boy tries to make a deck in the game. Deck doesn't work, boy throws deck in garbage can. I say boy because girls definitely had it right from the very beginning. If that's you, then this is the video for you. If it's not you, then hi, Jose, I hope your dad's doing well. We're going to do some talking about hard data and math, but first let's talk about some scenarios and reasons why you might be feeling this way. Your deck is bad because it doesn't know what it wants to do, and that's because deck building in Universus is hard, really, really hard. Decks want to do everything because under the right circumstances, they feel like they can. You've had situations where you really did truly do everything. We have regional and even national winning decks with identity crises because on the right day, with the right amount of luck, any deck can actually do anything. In other, more conventional card games, there tends to be a triangle of mid-range, control, and aggressive decks. We certainly have our share of decks that skew more towards one thing or the other, but I think that because of the pace of play in this game and how fast we work through the deck without outright tutoring cards, it's hard to be entirely mid-range, entirely control, or entirely aggro. So I'm going to be positing some deck archetypes that have been prevalent in My Hero and in Universus in general and present some deck building rules for each one of them. Okay, let's get right into it. Here's some hand size restrictions I want to get into. This is based on something that Jeremy Ray posted way back in the day before he was a designer. Rules for hand sizes. And this is important to look at as a sort of a guide. You can break the rules if you want to, but this is a great foundation to build from. 7 hand size decks or characters get to do whatever the frick they want, okay? You want to play no more than 1/5 non-attack, non-foundation cards. That means actions and assets. And no less than 1/4 of the deck should be spam foundations, which are 1s and 0s, because it's very important that you see 2 or 3 of these in your opening hand in each game. 6 hand size characters are usually all over the place, but they typically skew aggressive. No more than 1/7 non-attack, non-foundation cards, and no less than 1/5 of your deck should be spam foundations. Most of the time, if you're playing an aggressive 6-hander, you'll be playing more foundations, or more spam foundations than that even, because you want to build a very big amount early. 5 hand sizes are big, burly, and they need value out of their cards. You want to play no more than 1/10 of your non-attack, non-foundation cards, because if you get those on turn 1, you're doomed. It's over. No less than 1/6 of your deck should be spam foundations. The reason for this is because you need your cards on your board to be heavily impactful over the course of the game. So these are general, and they can skew in one direction or the other, but this is a good, safe beginning point for your hand sizes. Let's get into the archetypes that I mentioned earlier. Here's our first one. This is what I like to call poke pattern or card advantage decks. These ones like to fuck around and then find out. And what I mean by this is they like to play a card and then figure out how their turn's going to go from there based on how their opponent reacts and how their deck reacts even, right? You could play a 5 difficulty move. You know, one of the big paragons of this play style was Back Alley Haymaker. We play our 5 difficulty move. Maybe we build a foundation. Maybe we draw a card. We stun to our opponent and see how they react to it. If they tap aggressively to try to block it, you can really punish them on the back end with your efficient, safe deck. Or if they just opt to take the damage, you can just build afterwards. So they tend to be efficient, safe, garner advantage procedurally, and can close the game from the right board state. Most of these decks typically can't kill you from a subpar board state. You know, they need to have a developed board in order to attack you from. So they need to build a board. They need to have good, safe cards, defensive cards that will help them to get to the board state where they can kill you. They can be overwhelmed with the right hand and board state on the other hand. So you want to be able to pack some defense that will be able to stimulate aggression. These decks are usually hard to learn because there's a lot of board pieces, but they're easy to master once you see the cards and what they do with each other. It's not hard to kill somebody with Overhaul once you understand the strings. Examples of these, like I just mentioned, are Overhaul, the Midnight List that won Worlds last year. I would call a poke pattern card advantage deck, and Momo, who's the kind of the paragon of the play style. Here's some deck building suggestions for it. You should play no more than 62 cards in the deck. You can play more if your name is Nate DeWalt, but I'm going to tell you to go down to 62 every single time. 16 to 19 attacks, depending on how available tutoring is for your character. When I came in second at Gen Con last year, I went from 17 attacks, I took 6 attacks out, and I went down to 11, because it's a character who tutored out an attack every single turn if I wanted to. So if you have a way to tutor with your character, with Overhaul or with Momo or any other character like that, you can play less attacks in the deck. Skew more towards impactful, slow foundations with more 2 and 3 difficulty foundations than spam, because you want your board to be doing things to protect your game plan and also to be proactive on defense. Make sure that you have a deadlock game plan mainboarded. That doesn't necessarily mean that you need deadlock all over every single card. You should be playing cards just for the deadlock, but you should have a game plan for what might happen when you do go to deadlock, because it will go there sometimes. And that could just be, hey, my defense is really cracked when I have 15 foundations. I don't need deadlock. Also, my offensive tools are nuts and they can break any board, so I don't need deadlock. Or maybe you've identified that, hey, your offense can't break through a deadlock board, so you need some really, really powerful deadlock tools available to you mainboarded. You're going to need a plethora of ways to stimulate an aggressive game plan. You need lots and lots of ways to prevent your opponent from killing you before you get to the desired board state, and be able to generate the situations where you can take advantage of their board state. You want to mainboard some technology to shore up perceived weaknesses with more copies of those pieces of technology in the sideboard. These are going to be cards that react or cancel things, or maybe they are silver bullets for things that are weak in your own game plan. Things like Lost in Thought are great things to have a little bit mainboard and more sideboarded for when you need to touch things in your opponent's board. Move to the next one. This is what I would call a combo or engine-dependent aggro / mid-range deck. I know this is all over the place, right? But these are actually an identified archetype, okay? These want to see key pieces and then nuke the opponent, usually from full health. They can kill anything from the right board state. These are decks that want to see a key piece and then use that piece as early as possible. So the faster you find those pieces, the better. And this is why these decks you're going to see need to be very consistent. They can struggle if they don't find the pieces, or if the opponent is disrupting the toolbox. Some defense is necessary to stave off aggression while assembling your pieces, and these are really hard to learn and very hard to master, because they're very, very difficult decks that need to see specific things, and you need to be able to pull the trigger even when it feels not optimal, right? You need to have, if you have just enough pieces, you need to be able to pull the trigger, and feeling that out is really difficult. Examples of this include Ryukyu, who I would not call hard to learn or hard to master, but she qualifies for this. But the Gamer Toga and our Death Beam Eraserhead are both decks that are very, very hard to learn and very, very hard to master. And I'm sure actually Ryukyu, without the inclusion of Capture Uvadors, is going to be included in this. Some people are going to go in maybe earlier than they should have, or they'll try to, or maybe they'll hold it for longer than they need to. Let's talk about some deck building suggestions. You should play no more than 50 cards in these decks, or whatever the minimum deck size is. Maybe you're watching this in 2097 and the deck minimum is 100. Well, you can play the minimum for these cards. You need to find the pieces. Play as many attacks as is necessary. You can be 12 or it can be 25. If you're a deck that needs to see specific pieces, you need to play 4 of each of those cards. Something I see a lot of Ryukyu decks lately playing is like they're trying to play all these cute little attacks. No, just play 4 of each of her cards. That's all you need. Same thing goes for Eraserhead. You don't need tech attacks. You just need attacks that go into the card pool, do tons of damage, and make your other ones easier to play. If the combo pieces need to be on the board, having ways to pick up those pieces or cards that act as redundancies for them, even if they're subpar, are necessary. This means things like New Training Method, really, really powerful in these decks because they pick up foundations, or maybe you have a way to pick them up. I like, there's like Tasty Riff, does this tutoring thing now these days. I'm not saying that you should play it in those decks, but if you have a way to tutor your pieces out of your discard pile, those can be really, really good for the deck. Ensure at least one consistent way to buy a turn from your opponent. One of the reasons why Ryukyu is great is because for big old butt, she's got a lot of health. That's a way to buy a turn. Eraserhead is usually able to buy himself at least one turn. And release in Toga was really, really important for defending yourself. Efficient building is extremely necessary. I say typically it's extremely necessary. Don't play 2 or 3 diffs other than your win conditions. Your sideboard should be exclusively used to shore up a perceived terrible matchup. You should have something where you are preparing for a specific thing in the format that you are worried about doing poorly, or maybe it's just a 50-50 matchup that you can turn into a 60 or 70% matchup. Use your sideboard for those tools. Let's move on to the next one. What I call lean, mean attacking machines, or the Cobra Kai deck. These ones strike hard, they strike first, and they have no mercy. They can kill you from any board state. And I kill not anything though, right? You know, these decks tend to struggle against the poke pattern decks because those decks are poking safely, and these decks are not good at defending themselves. So they tend to take the damage and sponge up until they're within kill range of one of their attacks. 1 weak turn could be a death sentence. If you miss your kill shot, you are typically going to get punished. And if you don't get punished, then, God forbid you don't draw more attacks to follow up with. These tend to be easy to learn and very difficult to master. It's very easy to play a Tokoyami string, right? Orange card, blue card is a meme for a reason. But it's kind of hard to actually do this over the course of a tournament without getting punished at least once or twice, be able to exploit your opponent. And so that's why you see, even when, at the height of Tokoyami's powerfulness, or even at the height of Jiro's powerfulness, it's not been that they've just won every single time. People who won with them are people who can exploit those things that make the deck very, very powerful with it. Our Barrett Bryants and our Jose Naroños are really, really good at the game. Also, they're very lucky, and they know how to utilize their cards to the best of their ability. Really, really powerful, incredible players. Here's some deck building rules for the deck. You want to play no more than 55 cards, okay? There's some room for tag, but not a whole lot. Well, it says 0 room, a little bit further than it, but anyway, you don't want to play. You can play a little bit more loose than the combo decks, because you don't need a specific board state to go from. But you want to still play as close to minimum as possible. You want to play between 18 and 21 attacks, typically. It depends on what you're doing. There's some decks that can play more, some that need to play less, etc. Enough to see them consistently, but not too many, so that your ratio skews towards checking really, really poorly. I see sometimes people play like 25 attack, 25 foundation decks, and 50-50 on those mean that you're going to streak sometimes, and that's not a good thing. Find your kill condition in your deck and cater towards it. Do your thing, do it well. In order to strike first, you need to have the good cards, and make sure that just every single card in your deck is a good one. Don't put cards in your deck where you're going to draw them up and go, oh well, these aren't useful to me. And that goes into the next thing, that there's very little room for technology in these decks. Keep them in your sideboard and make your kill condition as consistent as possible. Use only efficient defense, preferring utilizing two-way cards that also do something on offense. These are cards that say, oh, hey, maybe they do +2 damage on my turn and -2 speed on your turn, or maybe they tap and then ready themselves, like Nice Try does. Using cards that do two things is really important for these decks, and those are the only defensive tools that you're really able to use. Most of the time, these decks are going to rely on having one good block, and they tend to be 6-hand size or hard to kill aside from that. If you can build 6, you can usually win on turn 2, so don't play 3 diffs, and your 2 diffs should be point removal or incredibly powerful cards that are just like too good to pass up. Everything else should be spam. Every single other card should be a spam. And sideboard is for your silver bullets that can stimmy your aggression. So if you have breaker hate or action hate on symbol, put those in your sideboard and side them in when you need them. Your concentrates, your showdowns, and things like that. And the last archetype that we see sometimes in this format are the Jack of all trades deadlock trap decks. These are decks that try to do a little bit of everything, and typically want to go really, really late into the game. They're not poking, they're just building a freaking wall. They're building a wall, and then they're going to try to kill you with their overwhelming, suffocating defense, shutting you out of the game. You usually benefit from having a ton of these cards, right? And some form of eventuality. There's an exemplary focus on defense and on weathering down your opponent's aggression. And you should give up on any hope of turn 2ing your opponent without some sort of cosmic influence making it happen. Some examples of these decks are Recovery Girl, Todoroki 1, and Void Eraserhead. Here's some deck ruling rules for that. You have to be very tough on your foundation lineup, as you need to have incredible board tools, but also enough spam to survive the early game. So follow the rules stringently from that hand size thing I posted later. We can post a timestamp here or something. Choose symbols with efficient defense on spam foundations. For this reason, if you don't need to sacrifice defense to play spam foundations, prefer finding symbols and characters that can utilize those spam foundations really, really well. So that way, when you do decide that you can poke and need to pump the gas, you can still build afterwards. You want to play no fewer than 60 cards because you're going to be trying to go late. You don't want to get milled out. And the sky's the limit after this. We had a 115 card Todoroki or something like that make second place at Nats. Not that I'm saying you should play 115 cards, but you want to play no less than 60 in these decks because they are trying to have a huge amount of tools in their toolbox. Play as many attacks as is necessary, but typically no less than 1/3 of the deck. This is a general rule in general, or this is usually how the decks will be constructed anyway. But because this archetype has such a varying amount of cards in deck, I'm not putting a hard and fast number on it. Just say 1/3 of the deck should be attacks. There should be an exhaustive amount of suffocating defense. You need to make sure that a normal hand will never kill you. They need to have the superhuman Superman hand that kills you. Your sideboard is mostly irrelevant at these deck sizes, but make sure make those 1-ofs into 2-ofs to make yourself feel better. Yeah, well, that's what I think about deck building. And I wanted to make this short and sweet if I could, because I know that if I went into like a huge math game into here, you guys would probably stop watching after the second minute. But I think these are great ways to think about how to frame the way that you build your decks and how to cater your deck building patterns. I pride myself on being a really good deck designer. And when I build my decks, I don't necessarily try to put them into these deck archetypes. You know, I had to come up with names for them for this video specifically, but I know what I'm going to be doing with a deck when I build it. I know that my attack lineup is going to be doing a specific kind of thing when I do the deck build, and I go from there. And I'll be talking about this more with some of these decks that I've been building lately, and we're going to be doing some deck profiles. I mean me. I'm going to be making some deck profiles for them later on. We can talk about that more in depth then. But I hope this was helpful. If it was, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. If you have any disputes, we can argue in the comments. It'd be great. Hope you guys have a wonderful Christmas.